Hi, welcome to our next Food for Thought in our Black Belt Advocacy series. I want to talk to you about nudge theory, which is a really interesting concept in how to change decisions. Well, not change decisions actually, how to change behaviour. And I think as a good advocate, if you want to change decisions, you need to change behaviour and people's kind of attitudes towards decisions. So I'm going to give you a story as the best way of illustrating what nudge theory is. And the story goes that in one of the toilets in Amsterdam's airport, the men's toilets were quite disgusting. And they were trying to think of ways to improve cleanliness. And some really clever guy came up with this idea of painting a fly on the urinal. And of course, given a fly on the urinal, what did the men do? They aimed at the fly and all the hygiene issues evaporated overnight. So what that simple thing of giving somebody something to aim at did was it changed behaviour to get a good outcome. And that's what we want to do as advocates. So we want to think about nudge theory. How do we nudge social services? How do we nudge the NHS to make decisions that really reflect what people want and what's important to people? Well, there's a couple of things you can do in nudge theory. One of them is kind of put peer pressure on a person. And I can show you how an example in the British culture where this happens. And it's through the government. So people who might do self-assessments may have noticed 5 years ago when you did a self-assessment form, and you were late with your submission, the government would write to you and say, you're going to get fined. And it was very threatening. That was the stick. You're going to get fined, get it in on time. And then they consulted with some people who knew about nudge theory, and they suggested instead of doing that, why don't you write to people and say 90% of people get their submissions in on time? By the way, we're going to fine you. But the emphasis in that letter was about other people's behaviour. And of course, as a human being, we want to fit in. So that had more impact on the number of submissions of your self-assessment for tax. The idea that you were one of the few not doing it, and that changed behaviour. So let's think about that in advocacy for a minute. We could use that to say to commissioners, look, all these other areas are doing this except us. And it's almost like a shaming thing. Well, they're doing it, why aren't we? So you need to get your examples. So think about commissioning. If you think about commissioning and tenders, look for the tenders that are really good and take them to your commission and say, look, this is what's happening. This area is commissioning advocacy for the non-statutory side. It's embedding advocacy within services a lot more fluidly than just your piecemeal statutory stuff. Now, I'm not for a second going to suggest that commissioners are then going to have an epiphany and go, oh, fantastic, here's incredible, we've got £1 million here that we didn't know about. No, it's not going to be like that. But as an approach, it could help to nudge the Commission into understanding if they know what other areas of the country are doing, which is good advocacy commissioning. Another way of nudging people, so you've got your kind of peer pressure. The other way of nudging people is to emphasise the what if we don't. What if we don't? And this is going to really help if the commissioner is motivated, they're a bit risk averse. So you could, for instance, if you've got a commissioner who's a bit risk averse and a bit concerned about legal challenges, I would be totally hammering the Haringey ruling that said that the local authority who didn't offer advocacy to a person who was entitled and then subsequently took an assessment of this person, because they didn't offer advocacy, that work is invalid. They just say, go back and do all that work again. Now, if my commissioner is a bit risk averse, I would be totally emphasising that, because what that's saying to local authorities is all the work you've done since 2015 under the Care Act, if you've not offered advocacy and the person was legally entitled to, that could be invalid. Think about the money that would cost and the resources and the legal challenges that could lead to. Emphasise that could nudge them then into thinking more carefully about, do we actually have advocacy as an offer embedded into our forms, into our assessment forms? Now, I know some local authorities do. They have a question that says, who is supporting this person through the decision? Are they entitled to advocacy? So if you want to nudge the commissioner, get that form and show it to them and say, look, this is what I think Gloucester local authority do, and this is what they're doing. Should we be doing this too? because if you don't, Haringey could impact. So nudge theory is an idea to change behaviour and to change the way decisions are made. I think it's really, really interesting. So I would encourage you to do a little Google search, nudge theory, check it out and talk about it in your team so that you're thinking about, as a strategy, how can we use this to influence people.